Australian artist, filmmaker Lynette Wallworth is renowned for creating profoundly empathetic works while pushing the boundaries of emerging technologies. She works primarily in immersive environments, including 360 film, virtual reality, interactive video, digital full dome, as well as feature documentaries. Lynette has received multiple international awards for her work, including the UNESCO City of Sydney Award and 2 Emmy Awards, and her works have been shown across the world, including at the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, the Smithsonian, the Venice Film Festival, and Sundance Film Festival. Lynette is currently a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Augmented and Virtual Reality and director of the Forum's New Narratives Lab for Underrepresented Voices. Transcendent Technologies, Shamanism in the Digital Age. In this presentation, Lynette will discuss the creative journey she experienced while co-creating her groundbreaking virtual reality work, Awavena, with the Brazilian Amazonian tribe, and how it has shaped her understanding of the potential for new immersive technologies to be used in support of current clinical trials. Wallworth was invited by Amazonian Yawanawa to create this stunning VR experience using cutting-edge technology to mirror their vision states. For the Yawanawa, medicine has the power to take you inside a vision to a place you have never been. By collaborating with Wallworth, Hushuhu, the first woman shaman of the Yawanawa, was able to use VR-like medicine to open a portal to another way of knowing. Awavena screened first to international acclaim at the 2018 Sundance and Venice Film Festivals and received an Emmy Award for Outstanding New Approaches to Documentary in 2020. It continues to tour and is used by the Yawanawa community to share a worldview that holds on the forest as central to our existence. Thanks, Lynette.
Thanks for that lovely introduction. And I'm joining you from Gadigal land today, under a flight path, but let's hope all will be well. I wanted to talk with you a little about my experience of making a VR work at the invitation of this man, Tashka Yawanawa, who's the chief of the Yawanawa people. Tashka and I met at the Skoll World Forum in Oxford. He had been brought there with 2 other Brazilian Amazonian chiefs who were working with basically aid organizations who had helped the Yawanawa protect their own lands from the 1980s onward. Tashka and I got on well, and I was back there showing a virtual reality work that I had made about the Madu people in remote Western Australia. So he came to look at this work. When he took those goggles off, and it's 2016, so some years ago now, Tashka had a very clear understanding of how that technology, virtual reality technology, could mirror the Yawanawa vision state. He took the headset off and said to me immediately, I understand what this technology does. It acts like medicine. It intensifies color and sound. It carries you without your body to a place you've never been. You meet the elders, you are given messages, and then you are returned to your body. We can use this technology. My friend, you'll have to come to the Amazon. What he's talking about there is something that I had experienced before with the Madu people. It's a convergence of technologies, or let's say different uses of different types of technologies to convey a similar thing. Here, we are looking at the Madu painting of an area that they're painting in Bangor, in the Western Desert. And on one side, you can see me panning over that painting. On the other side, you can see satellite imagery of the same area that the Madu are painting. So this is different technologies being used to express the same thing, but we're talking about different form of technology, but not different levels of knowing. In fact, the Madu know their land far better than the satellite imagery can show us. So when Tashka made this call about using a technology, he was basically going to co-opt what for them is a lesser technology than the visioning capacity of ayahuasca or uni. So we traveled. I traveled with my team. And when we arrived with 3 canoe loads of, let's say, our technology, we met Hushahu. And the story that the Yawanawa wanted to tell was about the first woman who was allowed to become a shaman. And this is Hushahu. The Yawanawa people, like many Amazonian indigenous peoples, were enslaved by the rubber tapping industries who moved in there from the 1800s onward. So you had whole tribes who were turned into slaves. You have the protectors of forest and of this technology, the ayahuasca technology, turned into slaves for a rubber industry and made to go out to work on behalf of that industry. The Yawanawa at the time were unable to carry out many of their rituals. They lost the knowledge. They lost much cultural knowledge, including the knowledge of how to do their paintings, their headdresses, the patternings in their bracelets and their armbands. The prevention of the rituals widespread across the whole community also prevented a lot of the other cultural knowledge being shared. And into this worldview, Hushahu was born with a dream she could become a shaman. In the Yawanawa community, there had never been a woman shaman, which meant women were never allowed to use the ayahuasca. They were not allowed until this point to drink it. It was the province of special men, privileged men. But Hushahu had a dream, and she prevailed upon the then very old shaman of the Yawanawa, Tata, and she asked him if she could do the training to become a shaman. Tata risked his spiritual authority in order to break a taboo, to allow a woman to undergo this training. Now, the story of this transition of male province over the ayahuasca and the emergence of female leadership and of female shamanism is the story that the Yawanawa wanted to co-opt virtual reality technology in order to send out. So this is a story they felt was of relevance to us in the Western world. And that's why I was called to send this particular story out of how a woman would undergo the shamanistic trials, undergo exposure to all of the medicines that the Yawanawa shaman must be able to absorb, and then become, from that point on, a shaman for the community. When we went to the community, what you saw immediately were bridges everywhere, as though there was a metaphorical meaning for the idea of creating bridges. The Yawanawa used this extremely long bridge here that you're seeing to move from everyday reality, banal reality, into transcendent reality. In other words, they divide up their world. They create context around the ceremony of having the ayahuasca. And one must transition across this very difficult bridge, I have to say, to move into the state of transcendence or sacredness in which you can combine your energies with the energy of the ayahuasca. So what they wanted was that we would film this experience and we would send this message out. The message of how once Hushahu began to take the medicines and went into a 15-month diet and isolation trial, with exposure to all of the medicines, she began to hear lost songs, lost cultural knowledge, get to return to her in her vision state. Tata, who was wise enough to know that the spirits could not be wrong, understood that if the spirits were bringing the cultural knowledge back through Hushahu in her training, the Yawanawa themselves had been wrong to prevent the women from having the ayahuasca experience. Basically, he said, the spirits cannot be wrong, so we have been wrong. Hushahu heard songs, lost songs. She heard the songs of the frogs. She heard the songs of the butterfly, and she saw in vision patterns which she could then translate into the beadwork that the Yawanawa use to express their knowledge of the forest in artwork. This meant that once Hushahu returned carrying these songs with her, she and Tata returned to the community, and they made a decision, the entire Yawanawa, that from that point on, all leadership positions should be held by both men and women. In other words, this was a balancing. This was an understanding that the medicine itself was requiring a balancing, and that leadership needed to be shared amongst men and women. I traveled for this trip with a marine biologist I've worked with for many years, Dr. Anya Sali, whose area of research is primarily to look at the purpose of a fluorescence in coral, the fluorescent gene. Anya believed that there would be fluorescence in the Yawanawa forest. And so she took her technology with her. And every night she would go out with a guide from the community, with a yellow filter over her glasses and blue torches to look for fluorescence and bioluminescence in the Yawanawa forest, and bring back beetles, spiders like you just saw, caterpillars like this one, back to the community where we attempted to film them, to place them inside the work Awavena. When we showed these insects under the lights, under the fluorescent exposing lights, to especially the older women of the community, they recognize these colors as the colors they see in these animals in their visioning experience. So again, this is a combination of technologies. One which is a Western developed technology being brought in close contact with an ages old technology, the Uni experience, in order to see where we might combine and see the same thing. Anya looked at the structures in the tree, in the grandmother tree, the salmoma. She looked at the structures in the butterfly wing, which was the pivotal vision that Hushahu saw. And we used our technologies to craft and draft imagery that would be able to show us or expose us to exactly those things that the Yawanawa had seen. Fundamentally, in the end, the Yawanawa wanted to share their vision state. They wanted to send a message to us about male and female balance, about the restructuring of power, and about what it means to form community where leadership is shared. And they wanted to share with us their vision state. This is the summation of the film, which I'm just going to play for you now, so you can get a little bit of a sense of what it was that they were hoping to share.
shaman, Tata. He has gone. But he knew what he meant every day, to be prevented from fulfilling the arc of your own destiny. And now, you are here, just as Tata imagined. He dreamed even of this moment, when you would come, and we could show you. He saw me as a shaman. He saw me as I now am.
So that's the experience of being inside this work, to move through the technology to the Yawanawa's home, to be with them through the technology so that they don't have to leave where they are. And Tashka was right. It gave an amazing sensation of their vision state. It showed the fluorescence, the colors that the Yawanawa see, it intensified sound. It used their singing and their dancing. But it did other things that we didn't predict. When we started to show the work, my producer and I, as we traveled it around the world, started to realize that people who had previously been exposed to an ayahuasca experience were reactivated by being in the headset into a somewhat of a vision state. We saw this over and over again, surprisingly to us. It seemed to reactivate or reopen channels of experience to those who previously had an experience of ayahuasca, which meant Tashka in his decision-making had made another portal available. And on hearing that, I took our kit, Awavena, and I want to offer it to Marg Ross, who you will hear from later, because I think that what we have here is a combining of technologies that could be useful for the ongoing support of those undergoing clinical trials. This is part of the giftedness of what the Yawanawa have sent out in asking for something to be created that simulates their visioning experience. They have also unknowingly created a tool, and we know this tool is being used by others in various parts of the world, including in Australia, in order to support the work that's happening in clinical trials. But what we saw is that the experience itself could act as a support to those who could no longer experience or have another dose. It could create a simulated dose, a sensation that would remind the mind of what it was that the first experience had offered. We also wanted to call back to exactly the place where this experience, this particular ayahuasca experience, had come from. We wanted to call people back to a respectful acknowledgement of who had sent this message out, the medicine keepers who had protected under difficult circumstances this technology, the ayahuasca technology, in their forest for centuries. So we used one of the beaded bracelets that Hushahu had seen in her vision state. This patterning is of the blue morpho butterfly. And we created an augmented reality experience that you could view using your phone that would connect you to a version of that blue morpho butterfly that would appear on the bracelet when you looked at it through your phone. We linked that bracelet to data coming from our partners who were observing through satellite imagery destruction in the Brazilian rainforest, in particular in the area of Acre where the Yawanawa are. And we would degrade the look of the butterfly according to an increase above levels which have been unfortunately accepted as normal of deforestation and forest fire. And then we set out sharing this work. One of the joys of working with the Yawanawa on the gift of this version of visioning and this story of power sharing was to travel with them to places where they could put this in front of world leaders at the World Economic Forum, for example, here, or here, where they could share it with a cardinal from the Vatican, an emblem of which previously represented for the Yawanawa, for many Yawanawa, the idea of those who had come in and prevented these very rituals from being held. These moments of shared communication, of the sacredness of the ayahuasca experience, was one of the joys of sharing this work with the Yawanawa as we traveled. I have observed many times the challenge for the Yawanawa when they see the corporatizing of the aspect of plant medicines globally, that there's frequently for them a failure to acknowledge who has held on to these medicines for all these generations, who has worked with the plants, who has understood them, and who has protected them. And I think that in part, they're sharing through our technologies now is a goal in order to create connection with us and to us. And my hope is that that is what we can do in conferences like this, instead of ignoring the origins and talking to the latest developments and imagining that our technology or our use of any new medicines might be an innovation where we fail to acknowledge who has held that knowledge before. I think that what the Yawanawa are doing are trying to continually create bridges. They are doing so in the hope that we might also listen to them around the way we bring these medicines into our world, understanding that a Western mindset is a different mindset, and that there are elements to the protection of these medicines that the Yawanawa would love to assist us with if we would ask them, which requires, can we say, a kind of humility to look at those not who have gone before, but who persist. I think it's so interesting in the message of Awavena that one of the fundamental things is this idea of access, that the ayahuasca should be made available, that it should not be given, held by a privileged few. And that was the story that they decided to use our technology to forward onto us. I think it's a form of exchange, but let's understand where they have come from. We're talking about peoples who've held on to these medicines whilst being enslaved by rubber barons who came into the Amazon in the 1800s, whilst having to endure missionaries who arrived deciding to introduce Western customs and remove the traditional Yawanawa customs. They had to fight to demarcate that very forest that held those vines and plants and trees. And in the 1800s, they were able to demarcate 92,000 hectares of their ancestral lands. In 2002, there was a threat by the government for a new road to cross through the state of Accra. And they had to fight to revise the boundaries of their lands yet again. And they officially doubled the size of Yawanawa lands to almost 200,000 hectares by 2008. In 2019, there was a day of fires in Brazil. Under the previous Bolsonaro government, there was an increase in forest fires and the burnings of traditional lands. Illegal farmers, ranchers, speculators, people basically who want to remove the forests, what is called the arc of deforestation, had a day of burnings, setting fire to forests across Brazil. And just as recently as 2021, the Brazilian government introduced a new bill which threatened to strip over 300 indigenous communities of their land rights. Thankfully, in 2022, there was a change of government in Brazil. But I suppose what I'm pointing to is the fragility of indigenous peoples in their holding on to sacred knowledge. And what is our awareness, not just of the protection that they have given to these knowledge systems for generations past, but what is our responsibility to help them onward, to protect and hold on to the knowledge that exists in these forests? I suppose I'm talking about a bridge. When we create these channels of new uses for ancient technologies, who are we acknowledging? What is our awareness of the knowledge holders who went before, who helped to develop these technologies? And how might we support the generations coming, who, as we know, will be under increasing pressure for loss of their homelands? I think what the Yawanawa would say when they say everything they know they have learned from the forest, I think what they would say is we have to act more like the mycelium. We must create the connections, not act in as though we are oblivious to them. We need to use our technologies to help our communities in a Western mindset, but overlaid with some of the understandings that the Yawanawa want to offer, which is the idea of not privileging access, of acting in support of community, of using medicines to help sustain healthy relationships with one another and a healthy understanding of oneself. The challenge is that we are Western. We create corporations and we seek profit. We have a mindset of extraction. And we think everything is here for our use. At the very worst, that is us. What the Yawanawa are saying is build connection. Think in other ways about why this medicine has been sent out to us at this moment for a more fulsome use across many fields, including for specifically, we might say, Western ills of anxiety and depression and the existential fear of death, a fear which the Yawanawa cannot really comprehend. In my experience of being with them, of listening to them, I have also sometimes misunderstood the level of connection they have already made. When we carried our technology, as I said to you, 3 canoe loads of heavy-duty cameras, of portable LiDAR scanners, of cameras that could see fluorescence under low light. I was worried that Tata, the old shaman, would feel uncomfortable being exposed to this technology. And in a phone call with Tashka very early on, I asked him if this was going to be okay, that Tata would need to, or Hushahu, approach the camera and give their blessing to the camera, offer the uni to the camera, so that when the visitor in the headset sometime later was watching, they would be the one who was being addressed. I wondered if it was okay for Tata to send his message out into a Western world. And there was silence on the other end of that phone call, which is a moment that always tells me that I've said something inappropriate. And indeed I had. And after a little while, Tashka gathered himself to give me a response in order to help me understand how I had misspoken. But he also had to understand with shock what I had just said. He said to me, Lynette, when Tata prays in ceremony, he prays first for the person who's in front of him. Then he prays for the community. Then he prays for the forest. Then he prays for you. He's always been praying for you all. Perhaps you never knew that. In that moment, I felt myself at the other end of a connecting thread that had been offered and that I had not taken. And that is what I wanted to offer in my conversation with you all today. The hope, the goal, the way to look towards those who are masters of these medicines, those who have been with these trees, these vines, these plants for eons, those who greet them as grandmothers and live with them still. I'm wondering, how do we support them in times to come when they are under enormous pressure and we are benefiting from the technologies that they have kept alive? I'm wondering what our responsibility is to work with these medicines in structures that are not entirely profit-driven and that understand that community matters, that access is important, that something has been gifted to us, and that we are in an emerging state able to construct something that might be beneficial for many. What is the form that structure should take? For the Yawanawa, the offer of being in communion with us is still there. Just this morning, I spoke with Tashka about talking with you all, and the fundamental word he wanted to offer was the word respect. I think there are ways we can learn more than we currently know by merging with those who have always held these medicines in their hands. But that requires an attitude from us that allows us to humbly ask and humbly receive and rethink the structures under which we bring these knowledge systems into our worldview. I think our technologies, such as VR, are enormously helpful, and we do not yet know just how powerful those technologies can be in support of the work that many of you are doing. And I would like to see those technologies used in concert with the Indigenous peoples who understand so much about what these medicines can offer. That's the message I got from them. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you. There's a lot we don't know about where the technology is going, but there's some things we can do if we try and assert where we would like the technology to move to. And I think that's why these kinds of conversations are so very important, that we participate, that we envision how we would like the technology to impact in our lives, and especially when we're merging it or blending it with these ancient medicines.